Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. Ranged combat is a broad term, but when it comes to action RPGs, the first thing that comes to my mind is a bow. Basically any form of medieval archer playstyle, whether it's fantasy, simulation, or something in between. Firearms and magic are obviously a form of ranged combat as well, but I really want to focus specifically on bow mechanics in this particular video. I will definitely do a separate video about gunplay and magic, so don't worry about that. That being said, let's start talking about bow mechanics in RPGs, along with a couple of good examples. The first and foremost are the actual mechanics behind the ranged combat system. RPG features are supposed to create depth behind every available playstyle in the game. But if the action itself is not executed properly, I'm afraid I won't care about the depth of the system, to be honest. Long story short, if the ranged gameplay doesn't feel right mechanically, I won't care about the RPG features behind it. For example, Mountain Blade Bannerlord has a great ranged combat system. It controls great, and when you get a hang of it, you can kill a lot of enemies with your bow in a single battle. Most of the mechanics are integrated with keeping a certain dose of realism in mind. After all, this game is leaning to medieval simulation and there are no fantasy elements. So, for example, your movement will affect your aim, especially when you're riding a horse. You basically never have a complete control of your shot in motion. Drawing your bow feels decent and the impact of your shots feels decent as well. Visual and sound effects are obviously the things that create a sense of impact, and Bannerlord certainly didn't disappoint when it comes to this. When I say decent, I actually mean it, because these visual and sound effects are far from top quality, to be honest. But they're passable, and it feels really good when you score a headshot and you hear that impactful sound effect. Blocking arrows with your shield also feels great, and the sense of danger from arrows on the open field is actually amazing. All of this combined makes the ranged combat in Bannerlord really fun. But when it comes to RPG features, in terms of ranged character progression, it's not that good. And not because this system is bad by itself, the game is just limited by the medieval simulation setting. Most of the perks that you can get will improve your aim, the numbers of arrows that you can carry, and something similar to that. All of that is fine, of course, but it doesn't make a huge difference at the end. An RPG with entirely different approach would be Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. Even though the combat system in this game is amazing in general, the bow mechanics are terrible, to be honest. You just lock onto the target and fire away, simple as that. But the RPG progression behind it can still make it fun. The fantasy setting allows the developer to be more creative, so you have skills like rain of arrows, multi-shot, you can put poison on your arrows, and so on. But still, the core bow mechanics are really bad. Personally, I will always prefer a system where you can manually aim your bow. That's like the most basic mechanic when it comes to any form of ranged combat, at least in my opinion. Dragon Age Inquisition had a similar take on ranged combat, but it felt a lot more impactful. Mainly because of the better sound and visual effects, but the regular attacks with the bow didn't feel any better than in Kingdoms of Amalur. No matter how impactful the unique skills can feel, the regular shots will always feel like a spam fest. I know that some people won't agree with this, but there is just something special about aiming your bow manually. The next game that I took as an example might trigger some people, but just remember that we're talking specifically about range mechanics and not the game in general. Assassin's Creed Odyssey had some great bow mechanics all around. Ubisoft has a lot of flexibility when it comes to the setting of these games, and that allows them to go crazy with some features. They basically combine real history with light fantasy elements, and that opens up a lot of possibilities when it comes to gameplay mechanics in general. The ranged combat would be a great example. Almost every feature related to ranged combat in Odyssey feels great, from shooting a regular shot to using some crazy abilities. It also offers you a decent amount of utility, like different arrow types that you can switch on the go. I can basically count on my one hand all fantasy RPGs that allows you to use different arrow types. And this is such a no-brainer, I don't know why more RPGs don't have this feature. The majority of ranged skills that you can learn in Odyssey are fun to use as well. This is what happens when you nail the fundamental mechanics and implement some interesting skills on top of that, along with decent utility. All the problems I have with ranged combat in Odyssey are not actually related to the ranged combat itself. The itemization, leveling and scaling are the part of this problem, and I talked about that in some of my videos. But all things considered, the ranged combat in Odyssey is really good. Skyrim is the last game that I would put on the list of RPGs with a great action combat, but using a bow in this game is something entirely different. I could use the same argument like I did for Odyssey when it comes to all the problems I have with the ranged combat in this game. It's not the ranged combat itself, but different design decisions around it. But if we put all of that aside, the ranged combat in Skyrim feels really good for multiple reasons. The first-person camera is definitely a big deal when it comes to this. Aiming your bow in first-person camera mode is vastly superior to third-person. Not only because it controls better, but the sense of immersion is much greater as well, it's almost incomparable. And I'm speaking about the first-person camera mode in general, not just about Skyrim. This is coming from someone who prefers playing action RPGs in third person, so keep that in mind. You can improve the ranged gameplay quite a bit if you install a couple of mods. But that's kinda not fair, so let's not talk about that. All things considered, the gameplay with the bow in Skyrim feels great. Sneak attacks have that really satisfying sound effect, it never gets old. There are some interesting archery perks, but the whole perk system in vanilla Skyrim is a bit lackluster, to put it lightly. However, I like the extra attention to detail here, like when your character breathes in while zooming for a shot. Small details like this can make a huge difference in my opinion. Before I start talking about the RPG with the best range combat, here are some honorable mentions. I usually avoid talking about the games that I haven't played, but I have to put Horizon Zero Dawn on this list. A lot of people are praising the ranged gameplay in Horizon, and from all that I could see, I think I would agree. To be honest, when your main gameplay focus is playing with a bow, it better be good, right? I will definitely play this game when it comes out on PC and make some videos about it. Even though Monster Hunter World is not a full-blown RPG, I would feel really bad if I didn't put it on this list. Ranged mechanics in this game feel really impactful and the weight behind your shots is just amazing. It's a bit harder to get into as a new player, but once the gameplay grips you, you can easily spend hundreds of hours. And my award for the action RPG with the best ranged combat goes to Dragon's Dogma. Playing Dragon's Dogma as a ranger or magic archer is a very unique experience. I already did a video about Dragon's Dogma combat in general, so I kinda hesitated talking about it again. But no matter how hard I tried to find another action RPG with better range combat, I just couldn't do it. But what exactly makes it so good? Well, first of all, it feels insanely impactful. It definitely borrowed some things from Monster Hunter, which is to be expected because the same developer made this game. And like I already mentioned, the bow gameplay in Monster Hunter games feels really impactful. Dragon's Dogma is no different. Even the most basic shot feels really satisfying to use because of the great animations and sound effects.
A weakling is a weakling still. It's difficult to judge distance from opposing foes across such...
This certainly wouldn't be possible without the fantasy element, and that's exactly why I said the developers have a lot of creative freedom in these kinds of settings. And the overall speed of the gameplay is another thing that makes the ranged combat feel really good. It takes just a second to prepare your basic shot, but it doesn't feel weightless. You remain mobile while holding a drawn bow, but you're not fast like in Odyssey, for example. I think they managed to find a perfect balance when it comes to the speed of the gameplay. But this also depends on your inventory's weight though. When it comes to all the abilities that are related to ranged combat, Dragon's Dogma did an amazing job. Whether you prefer a classic ranger playstyle or something crazier than that, Dragon's Dogma got you covered. A simple ranger ability would be something like overcharging your shot, which basically feels like you're shooting from a sniper rifle. Oh yeah, it might be the sound effects. But you can learn a lot more crazier stuff like pinning your enemies on walls, for example. Speaking about crazy ranged abilities, Magic Archer Vocation is a really unique playstyle. It mixes cool spells with the Archer playstyle and it's fun as hell.
I've come to feel more at peace when the capital is in sight.
Get him! They attack in quick succession!
You'll have more than enough cool abilities for any kind of ranged build you want to play. Besides all the abilities, you have a lot of arrow types with different effects as well. All enemies have a weak spot, and if you manage to hit those weak spots, you'll do a lot more damage. By doing this, you can also knock down enemies, which is especially useful versus bigger monsters. And speaking about bigger monsters, the boss fights in this game is something that you absolutely have to experience for yourself. The only problem with the ranged combat in Dragon's Dogma are the hitboxes. It's not a major problem, but they're noticeably larger than you would expect. I think this was a bigger problem when the game initially released on PS3 and Xbox 360. But since I never played that version of the game, I can't compare it to the PC version. The game is originally designed for a gamepad, so bigger hitboxes are something like aim assist, I guess. I don't know if they tweaked the hitboxes in the Dark Horizon, but they don't seem that bad at all. Dragon's Dogma is far from a perfect game, and I was very critical about some features it has. But I think it absolutely deserves all the praises for the gameplay in general. In the process of making this video, I asked my community about their opinion about the best ranged combat in RPGs. And I wasn't surprised when I got a lot of Dragon's Dogma comments. Anyway, I would like to hear your opinion about this topic. What RPG had the best bow mechanics or the ranged combat in general? Leave a comment down below. If you found this video entertaining, pressing the thumbs up button would mean a lot. Don't forget to subscribe for more content and click on the bell icon so you don't miss any future uploads. Special thanks to my Patreons, and if you as well want to support this channel in the long run, consider checking out those links in the description. That would be all, and I'll see you in the next one.